اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع اے الوداع، شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع اے الوداع،
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع اے الوداع، شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع اے الوداع،
خاتمہ بالخیر چہلم کا ہوا،
خاتمہ بالخیر چہلم کا ہوا،
خاتمہ بالخیر چہلم کا ہوا، الوداع اے اشک بارو الوداع اے الوداع،
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع اے الوداع، شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع اے الوداع،
کہہ رہے ہیں مرقدوں پر اہل بیت،
مرقدوں پر اہل بیت،
کہہ رہے ہیں مرقدوں پر اہل بیت، فاطمہ زہرا کے پیارو الوداع اے الوداع،
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع اے الوداع، شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع اے الوداع،
دشت سونا پاس بستی بھی نہیں،
دشت سونا پاس بستی بھی نہیں،
دشت سونا پاس بستی بھی نہیں، بے دیارو بے مزارو الوداع اے الوداع،
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع اے الوداع، شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع اے الوداع،
کربلا کی خاک کو سونپا تمہیں،
کربلا کی خاک کو سونپا تمہیں،
کربلا کی خاک کو سونپا تمہیں، عرش اعظم کے ستارو الوداع اے الوداع،
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع اے الوداع، شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع اے الوداع،
اکبر و اصغر علی کی زینب کو پکارو الوداع الوداع
بھائی کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
قبر سے آواز آئی ہے بہن
قبر سے آواز آئی ہے بہن
قبر سے آواز آئی ہے بہن وہ بہن زینب سدھارو الوداع الوداع
بھائی کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
گھر کہاں کنبا کہاں قبریں کہاں
کہاں کنبا کہاں قبریں کہاں
گھر کہاں کنبا کہاں قبریں کہاں اے غریبوں بے دیارو الوداع الوداع
بھائی کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
قبر پہ بیٹوں کی زینب نے کہا
قبر پہ بیٹوں کی زینب نے کہا
قبر پہ بیٹوں کی زینب نے کہا ماں وطن جاتی ہے پیارو الوداع الوداع
بھائی کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدی کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع بھائی کے سوگوارو الوداع
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم.
رحمة للعالمين قل إنما يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فهل أنتم مسلمون فإن تولوا فقل آذنتكم على سواء وإن أدري أقريب أم أدري لعله فتنة لكم ومتاع إلى حين قال رب احكم بالحق وربنا الرحمن المستعان على ما تصفون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Thank you very much, Marthiya. Beautiful recitation once again.
In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the giver of mercy. We wrote in the Psalms, as we did in earlier scripture, my righteous servants will inherit the earth. There is truly a message in this for the servants of God. It was only as a mercy that we sent you, prophet, all people. Say, what is revealed to me is that your God is one God. Will you submit to him? But if they turn away, say, I have proclaimed the message fairly to you all. I do not know whether the judgment you are promised is near or far, but he knows what you reveal and conceal. I do not know. This time may well be a test for you, an enjoyment for a while. He said, my Lord, pass the true judgment, and our merciful Lord is the one whose help we seek against what you disbelievers say. Salaat.
Thank you, Sister Fazia, Brother Marthiya. Now we request Brother Mansoor to offer the Marthiya tonight. Please welcome Salawat.
محمد آل محمد بلندر سر یہ سوچتا ہوں کہ عابد کا حال کیا ہوگا یہ سوچتا ہوں کہ عابد کا حال کیا ہوگا اسیر ہو کہ وہ جب شام میں گیا ہوگا یہ سوچتا سنا ہے شام میں جاتے ہی خون رونے لگا سنا ہے شام میں جاتے ہی خون رونے لگا نہ جانے شعر نے اس وقت کیا کہا ہوگا، نہ جانے شعر نے اس وقت کیا کہا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا گلے کی طاق نے عابد کو کیا جھکانا تھا، گلے کی طاق نے عابد کو کیا جھکانا تھا، وہ اپنے کھوئے ہوئے لال ڈھونڈتا ہوگا، وہ اپنے کھوئے ہوئے لال ڈھونڈتا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا وہ ظلم دیکھے سجاد نے حسین کے بعد، وہ ظلم دیکھے سجاد نے حسین کے بعد، مجھے یقین ہے کہ اب تک بھی رو رہا ہوگا، مجھے یقین ہے کہ اب تک بھی رو رہا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا وہ یاد کرتا تو ہوگا وطن کی شاہی کو، وہ یاد کرتا تو ہوگا وطن کی شاہی کو، بہن کو دفن جو پردیس میں کیا ہوگا، بہن کو دفن جو پردیس میں کیا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا ہوں کہ عابد کا حال کیا ہوگا، اسیر ہو کے وہ جب شام میں گیا ہوگا، ये सोचता हूँ। पर मोहम्मद आली मोहम्मद बुलंदर सलावत।
Thank you, Brother Mansoor, for your beautiful recitation. We are always indebted for you. You bring a lot of spirit to our Muharram gatherings. Sisters, brothers, it's our pleasure tonight to welcome back a familiar face and a dear friend of many at Iman, Reverend Dr. Andrew Larson. For those of you who are not met him, not familiar with him, he is a peacemaker who usually goes around with a high-powered lens, okay? And he goes out with his lens to build bridges between Muslims and Christians, and for that matter, people of all different faiths, using his breakthrough photography. And he calls it visual peacemaking. I remember a few years ago, he said he was going to go to Hebron, and he said, "Hey, Jawad, what is the advice that you give me?" And I said, Reverend Larson, the arc for the moral universe is very long, right? And according to King, it bends towards justice. So only my advice is to you is to be on the right course of justice and let history be witness to be on the right course of justice. Okay? So he's actually done quite a bit of traveling in the Middle East, specifically in the West Bank. And most recently, he was in Iraq. And he is only armed with a Canon 5D Mark III camera as he captures digital images and builds lasting friendships. What Andrew Larson has learned serves as a lesson for all of us, that if you have enough love in your heart, and if you have enough love in your heart, you can visualize peace. It just might happen. Reverend Larson has been an ordained minister, and when he's back in the Pacific Northwest, he calls Seattle's Quest Church as his home church, but he can tell us more about what his affiliations are with the different areas. So today, what Reverend Andrew Larson is going to talk about, Andy, I call him Andy, and he's going to will share his experiences from his recent trip to Najaf and Karbala during Ashura of 1444. He wanted to go to Arbaeen. I said, Arbaeen is probably very crowded, go to Ashura. And he will talk about the importance of lament when confronting injustice, and how examples of Ali and Hussein are models we can all follow. We live by God's principles, not for our own ego. While we live with injustice, we don't allow injustice we experience to corrupt the will of God, or how we respond. We speak to and we confront injustice, but in a way that honors God's will. We don't succumb to temptation to employ means unbecoming to God, and we look forward to the reign of God with peace, with justice will be the way humanity lives. So with great pleasure to welcome Reverend Larson. Please welcome Salawat.
It is very good to be with you tonight. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I am deeply honored and humbled to be your guest tonight. I have had a deep joy of praying with you many times over the last, gosh, I hate to count how many years, but it's been a while. And I did have the honor, the privilege of traveling with Dr. Lakiat Hakim to Iraq. I was there early August through the 12th to experience the Ashra. And I'm going to share a few things from my notes. I'm going to try to go fast because there's how do you capture that experience over 12 to 13 days and 15 minutes, but I'm going to do my best. It's part, I should offer a disclaimer. So if I say anything that is inaccurate or off a little bit, do not blame Brother Jawad. Just it's my fault, just personally. But part of what I want to share with you tonight is part travelogue, part personal perspective as a Christian minister. So I journaled through the whole experience, wrote things, shared with many people who were following my journey, and especially I shared with the desire to articulate and explain some things that I was experiencing, in particular to the church, to the Christian community, more specifically. And so you're going to hear some of those reflections here tonight. I've carried a burden, first of all, just by way of introduction, for the country of Iraq for many years. I even remember writing to Senator Patty Murray in 2003, asking her to vote against going to war in Iraq. It just felt wrong for me for some reason. At that time, in 2003, I was a pastor in a church actually here in South Bellevue, and the people in our congregation felt it was totally legitimate to go get Saddam. The people in our congregation were kind and generous. They were probably middle of the road, good practicing Christians. However, even though they loved Jesus as far as I could tell, and their neighbors, there was also what I felt at that point, a subtle creeping, what I call Islamophobia. Our church reflected what was happening in our world. The images in the news, which were read selectively by our congregation at that point, had done their proper work on the collective white American conscience. Of course, there are two sides to any of these events, but we were reading in our particular congregation a certain slice and interpreting in a certain way. The images in the news, which were read selectively, had done their proper work on our collective consciousness. We did not always receive a perspective of how the other side saw those events or the factors leading to them, and we were interpreting them through our particular lens. But for the sake of the conversation here, what was I supposed to do as a spiritual leader in a church at that point? What am I supposed to do with all of this stuff as a follower of Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace, as a pastor of a largely white congregation? How was I to lead the congregation then, or help anybody today understand this part of the world in my particular network? And our friends and neighbors who have immigrated to this part of the world. To begin with, and this I'm quoting from a book that has been important for me in this work. To begin with, we must acknowledge that talking about people, their scriptures, and rituals is not the same as talking with them and observing how their faith and practices are manifest in their lives and communities. That was 2003 when I began this journey. That was what motivated me to come and visit the Imam Center and many other communities, Muslim communities, both Shia and Sunni in the greater Seattle area and in many of my travels. This quote that I just read to my Christian friends is one of the primary reasons why I took this trip that I just came back from. Much of the conversation around Islam today, and quite honestly within evangelical circles, resembles the violation of what we call in the Hebrew scriptures that we also read, the violation of the 9th commandment, which reads, bearing false witness against our neighbor. We are not to bear false witness against our neighbor. That is what a large part of the church, which I seek to lead and be a part of, needs to hear this and to understand it and to not violate that commandment. Secondly, should we not at least try, again, I'm speaking to my Muslim or to my Christian audience, follow Jesus' commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves. We within the church, this is a confession before you, we within the church have not done this very well when coming to our Muslim neighbors. This conflicts with the teaching of Jesus, and as a spiritual leader within the Christian tradition, I have the responsibility to guide people away from this error. But this is also about our experience in Iraq, and I want to share a few things with you. Again, this is kind of personal travelogue and journey or journal. As I was experiencing this, immersed in with probably another 5 million pilgrims, which was a little overwhelming to me. I didn't see another person with my skin color, white hair, and I stood out. In fact, many people said, "You stand out like a sore thumb, Larson." But the colors, sounds, and emotions of the Ashura began for us in Baghdad, and we were visiting the shrine of Imams Kazim and Jawad, the seventh and the ninth Imam, within the Shia tradition. There will be, and as I was writing this out, there will be a crescendo through the week, and next, as we build up to the main act in Karbala, when the martyrdom of Hussein is remembered, we will be there for that. But as you can imagine, there was this crescendo, there was a sense of anticipation through the whole week. And it was up to 120 degrees. So for me from Seattle, it was a little overwhelming as well. But alhamdulillah, God protected us. There was air conditioning in our buses and in our hotels. But still, leaving to go out to some of these places was a little overwhelming. This is our group, and I just wanted to say my travel companions were remarkable. In our group, we have 2 PhDs. One leads our team, Dr. Lakat Hakim. The other teaches world religions and is passionate about American indigenous cultures and history. Also, this other PhD friend of mine, his mother is Shia and was traveling with us, but his father is Sunni. So we had had some fascinating and important conversations about the differences even within Islam and how he experienced and lived it. His wife lived in Portland for 10 years and worked with a curriculum assessment in South King County schools funded by the Gates Foundations. So there are all kinds of little connections that were being made. I also had the beautiful experience of meeting Iswan's sister and brother-in-law, and 3 beautiful daughters who traveled with us. Mohammed, his brother-in-law, he became my special friend and guide along the way. He would say, well, this is what we're seeing. This is what you need to do when you go up to the shrine and touch it. He showed me how to do the ablutions. He showed me many, many things. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience to be given such hospitality throughout the whole experience. He often joked with me. In fact, Dr. Takim, he shared a joke. He works in interfaith circles. And so let me ask you this question. How does Moses make his tea? Well, he brews it. It's really how he does it. Okay, I thought it was pretty funny. This was the first night in Baghdad. We had arrived. We'd spent a day in Cairo, and as I journaled about this, my heart was full, and it was getting fuller each day as I experienced this. We stopped in Cairo, and I had to do a little bit of the tourist thing, so some photos, and of course, I was overwhelmed by the shrines, the beauty within the shrines. I was also refreshed, if you can imagine traveling in 110-degree weather and then stepping into the shrine that was really an oasis from the desert heat. And it was a powerful place to come and to pray, to reflect, to experience, and to contemplate the house, let's see if I get this right, the Beit Ali. I said it right, the House of Ali, and many of the leaders within the tradition that are deeply, deeply inspirational. And I'm just a beginner, so be patient with me, but I'm learning and deeply appreciated this chance to be with this group and these amazing places. Just a few tourist slides here. One of the things that I was able to instruct or kind of orient our bus with, our friends, there was 20 people in our group. They were serving peanuts, and I held this out. This is from Costco. This is from Kirkland. This is from where the Imam Center is located. And it was news to all of that, but I was able to kind of give them a little bit. So they were giving me so much, so I thought I would give them something. Coping with the heat today, on this particular day, is made easier by random acts of kindness and hospitality in our trip back to Karbala. These guys are a regular feature. This gentleman standing here, this is at the bus door. They're stationed along points along the highway, some at roundabouts. And when our vehicle slows, these guys invite us to open the door, and in pit stop fashion, like quickly, within 15 seconds, they empty a tray of these chilled waters, and it was incredible. If you can imagine the heat, all just kind of on the border of dehydration. And these guys were doing this for free, just out of the goodness of their heart, out of service, and it's a value I've come to respect and observe. It was just literally amazing for me. On the day of Ashura, there are a few times in which the prayers of Imam Hussein were narrated when we got to the point later in the second week. And there were incredible moments that give us insight into the depth of the relationship that our beloved Imam had with his Lord. There are moments where, in the depth of tragedy, we witness the words of the calls of Imam Hussein as he speaks to the one who he has sacrificed everything for. The first prayer on the day of Ashura, we recited in a quiet place, and it was in the morning. The Imam sees, he's praying as he sees tens of thousands of cavalry approaching him. This is praying and remembering what happened in the deserts of Karbala. Thousands of cavalry approaching him. In this moment, where there are thousands against dozens, he raises his hands to the sky and affirms his trust in God. He essentially says, "Oh God, it is you that I trust in all grief. It is you that I trust in every moment. No matter what happens, no matter how many enemies there are standing against me, no matter how weak I feel, no matter how few friends I have, the sacrifice and this fight are for you. I desire you, O God, you alone." This incredible strength that he shows in these moments is not astonishing to those who know his caliber, his character, but his words send goosebumps down our spines as we try to imagine the scene in the desert. You can see in my eyes, I'm a little tired here, but deeply impacted by this whole journey of walking with this team and observing prayers, participating in the Ashura ceremony throughout the entire week. But gladly, there were also moments where you could rest. And I observed this often in the mosques or in the shrines where we could actually lay down on the floor in the basement, especially in the shrine in Samara. And these gentlemen were inspiration for me. So I took permission and liberty and also did the same. I want to close with just this story because our time is short. We had the chance to visit Sistani near the end of our time, and I'm still savoring and pondering the significance of that visit. These are notes that I wrote in my journal. Sistani is a deeply spiritual leader, period. Even though we may not agree with everything, with all of his fatwas, there are many of them that I do agree with. He would not allow Paul Bremer, if you recall, back in 2000, after Saddam was extracted, to write the Constitution for the country. I deeply, deeply respected that. But there's other things about Sistani that struck me as we were able to visit him. He happens to be a humble, simple man. He lives in a modest home in Najaf. He also happens to be the most influential cleric in the country, as you all well know. This is something that I'm again sharing with my Christian friends. He is today 92 years old. Yesterday, when we were in my journals, we were visiting him. One of the members in our group, after we had some time, after he shared some wisdom with us, one of our members asked Sistani this question: what is the greatest lesson you've learned from your whole life experiences? And with this, I close my part this evening. He sat there for a moment. We're all sitting there waiting for what he would share with us. And he said, number one, be good towards all people, and especially to those who may not reciprocate and be good to you. Help those who you encounter in the community with all of your capacity, with all that you can. Number three, have good morals, even if you encounter people who do not have good morals. As we gathered to leave after he shared, our hearts had been softened by the words of this humble man. We sauntered out of the same room where the Pope had met Sistani last year. But they picked me out. The staff, they pulled me aside, wondering, was there something I had done? They told me to wait as the rest filed out. I stood there wondering what was up. A few others gathered. Dr. Takim came into the circle to help interpret and answer some questions. They started asking questions. Who was I? Why was I there? Why did I come to Iraq? Dr. Takim helped interpret why I was there, and I was known then at that point in the group as the Reverend. The Reverend, everyone called me the Reverend. That's my title as a Christian minister. He said that I was there as a Christian brother and I came to visit the shrines out of respect and to learn. All of that was deeply true. He said a few other things, and they began to reach for my hand and place their hands, their chest as a form of greeting. This is something I experienced quite a bit. And it was apparent that they were impacted that I was there. I was deeply impacted by their response to my presence with them. After a few other exchanges, the gentleman who first pulled me aside stepped behind the door and came out with a gift for me. He gave me a ring as a remembrance and a thanks for the visit. Thank you for listening to my story and reflections from my visit to.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing. Thank you for all what you do. Thank you for being there. Thank you for building up the bridges. I hope it was a good experience for you. And then, if you're around towards the end of the program, we might give an opportunity for Q&A. I don't know what your schedule is like, but if you're around. Okay. So, I think what we will do, brothers and sisters, is that after the program, towards the end there, we will have a Q&A today and tomorrow. Because I think the Sheikh, he touched a lot of topics. I know there's a lot of discussion that took place. And we would love to actually engage with the Sheikh after our Ziyarat today, inshallah. Okay. So it's really my pleasure now to again invite Sheikh Abdulrahman Cherri to continue his discussion that he started yesterday. I received a lot of good feedback. One of the feedback I received, which is really instructing the Sheikh, the only feedback of instruction is that speak loudly. So, but people could not hear you very well. So maybe it was the microphone. Maybe you could say. So please welcome me to Salawat. And I think you need a chair again, right, Sheikh?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, dear sisters. I'm not sure. Can everyone hear me? I asked that at the beginning of yesterday's lecture, and I think they raised the microphone volume, but it seemed that they didn't raise it enough. So, can everybody hear me in the back? Everyone? Yes. Okay, great. I did say yesterday I didn't want to scream because I need my voice for the next 2 nights. So, if we can amend the microphone, it's better than me screaming.
You're fine.
So we began last night talking about the topic that was introduced, the title of the theme of the 3 nights that I'm going to be speaking about. And that's related to religion in the modern world. And I'm going to briefly summarize a few points that were touched upon so that we can go on from there and continue tonight with what was initiated last night. And I said that the idea of religion in the modern world is something that has to be dealt with first and foremost in the philosophical sense. Because human beings, when trying to understand the truth and trying to understand reality, they have to sit down between them and themselves and analyze what truth is. They have to decide what the criteria that they use in order to discover what truth is. How do we discover truth? How do we know if something is true or something is false? How do we know that a God exists? How do we know that religion is a true thing? How do we know that science is something true? So we have different answers to this. And human beings, since the moment we knew, they began thinking. At least, if we go back to the oldest times, whatever archaeological evidence we have shows that human beings had different answers to this question. They all wanted to discover what is reality, what are we doing here, where do we come from, where are we going? And this is something that we have to, as human beings, decide as a prerequisite to approaching anything in our life. How do I discover what the truth is? How do I know? Do I use empirical evidence? Is the physical reality the only reality? Was there something beyond this physical reality? If there's something beyond, is there a God? Are there multiple gods? Are there angels? Are there creatures that we cannot see with our physical body? Is there energy in this world? So these are questions that we have to think about, we have to discover. And in our narrations, we have the Imams emphasizing the importance of it. Imam Ali, for example, says, may God have mercy on the person who knows from where, to where, and in where. Where do you come from? Where are you going? And what are you doing here? The basic questions that we ask ourselves as human beings because we have this consciousness. We're aware of our own existence. We're aware of our own reality. We can sit down between us and ourselves and ask these questions. What am I doing here? Now, I have a few cats in the house, and I highly doubt that my cats sit down and discuss these existential questions between each other, right? I think, they're just walking around the whole time looking for food, and they don't have food, they come lovey-dovey with you, and then when they eat, they run away and they don't know you anymore, right? And I've never seen them gathering with each other, sitting down in a circle, discussing things. Maybe they are, I don't know. I don't claim, to understand like cat mind and cat language, but I'm assuming that they don't do this. Now, human beings do this. We've done it for thousands of years, and we continue to do it. So when it comes to the question of religion in the modern world, well, modernity, as I mentioned briefly yesterday, developed as a philosophical idea. It was in the Renaissance in Europe in the 1500s, where the church and the state, or the sciences and the church, began to separate. And after a period of time, we had individuals who claimed that truth can only be found using the physical reality. So we have philosophers who were religious at one point, and then slowly they began to move away from that. In philosophy, for example, if you go to Greek philosophy, you have the subject of metaphysics. You have physics, which is dealing with the physical world here. Then you have metaphysics, which is what is beyond the physical world. So during the development of metaphysics around Kant's time, he was a philosopher, metaphysics was reduced also to a physical reality in a sense. Kind of blocked anything that exists beyond the physical world. And slowly, by doing that, the minds of the human beings began to change. Civilizations began to change. And this mostly happened in the Western world. Before globalization happened and the ideas were transferred to the East, in the West, it developed more than other places. And even until this day, you find, for example, in the East, you have a lot of countries where people are still religious, still hold on to their beliefs, and the development happened a bit differently. Now we're living here, and there's a lot of changes that happen, a lot of developments that happen. Technology, for example, the development of phones, smartphones, the internet. It's not just a device that I hold in my hand and I can use to call people and read the news or have, Facebook or social media accounts and, connect with other people. The phone is a way of life. It affects how I live. It affects how the society around me lives. It affects how supermarkets are run. And it changes our whole lives. Schools change, curriculums change, mentalities change. Even discovering truth and how deeply we delve into knowledge also changes. A lot of superficiality, for example, happens because of the technology that we have. So when we were faced with this development of technology, we're not only dealing with the development of smartphones or electronics. There's a whole worldview, a whole mentality, a whole attitude towards life that changes. A lot of people nowadays, for example, suffer from things that people hundreds of years ago never suffered from. We have this inability to be satisfied. We're always looking for something new, something quick, and we want these quick fixes, right? That's why the approach to depression and problems in life, even in the medical field, look at, neurology, for example, or psychology, for example. Therapy is not what's adopted as the first method or the method to go to fix your life. Now you take a pill, that should deal with your problem. Very quick fixes. You have an issue, here's a pill. You have a problem, do this very quickly, fix it. So we've become like robots in a sense. So where does religion play a role in all of this? And what is the meaning of religion in this world that we live in? We feel like we're so far away from the time that the religion was revealed in, even though it was 1,400 years ago, which in the timeline of existence is very little, right? Millions and millions of years, 1,400 is very little, but the changes that happened within the past 100 years are more than the changes that happened in thousands and thousands of years that preceded that. So the challenges that we have as religious people are not the same that the church faced, for example, during the Renaissance. It's much more complex, much more difficult. The access to information that we have is unprecedented. We're able, any question you have, you can go online, Google it, find any answer you're looking for. No expertise, nothing. You just read it, you find it there, and then you realize a lot of people, for example, are exposed to, the idea of all these different religions answering the same question in similar ways and sometimes in different ways. So how do I know if my religion is the right one? How do I know that my version is the right version? There's so many, hundreds of versions out there. How can you verify? Do we have the tools to deal with that? Am I able to verify that my religion is the right one and someone else's religion is the wrong one? Well, it's very difficult to do that, right? That's why the answer to most of these questions is very basic and superficial. So you come and say, for example, that everyone's wonderful, everyone's this, everyone's that. You just kind of give a very basic general answer to all these questions, which I'm not saying is wrong, but I'm saying our approach to things has become so simplified nowadays because of the way information is dealt with. So this is a reality, it's a problem. Religious communities face them, whether they're Muslim communities, or they're Christian, they're Jewish communities, Hindu communities, Buddhist communities. All these different religions face the same challenges. The question of God, the question of the validity of the religion, question of salvation, question of heaven and hell. How am I to be a good individual before God? This is a question that every religion deals with. And as a Muslim community, we also have to deal with this, especially when we're living here with so many different cultures, so many different belief systems, so many different communities that are not Muslim. How do we deal with them? What is the truth? What is my obligation towards other people? And how do I deal with these questions that I have no answers for? What does my religion teach me? How do I stand out in this belief system amongst everyone else? I'm sure these are questions that everybody has thought of, and if not, you will at one point think about them. So when it comes to our tradition and the narrations that we have, that we've received from our Imams, for example, it seems that the attitude or approach to this was a very open and broad one. The Imams were very clear about the idea of not being able to reach the truth absolutely or completely if there is not a messenger living amongst the people. So that obligation we can put aside. If we don't have Jesus amongst us, or Moses or Muhammad or any prophet, obviously our access to that type of knowledge is going to be limited. Because in order to receive that divine knowledge, you as a medium have to be at a level or capacity where you can receive that type of knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is cut off. It means that there is some knowledge that we can receive, but it's not the same level as the knowledge of the prophets. So when we understand that our duties and obligations become less. We have to find ways to be able to make meaning for our lives, to be able to connect to God and the divine without losing that connection, but also having meaning in our life. Because what religion came to do for us, it came to create or to make us human beings. That's the first and foremost goal of religion. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very clear with the objective of his message. He said that I was sent to perfect your morality. He wants to perfect it. He wants to elevate our status as human beings. To become a human being is not an easy task. We have this animalistic nature inside of us. The Prophet wanted us to live as human beings. Why? Because if you live as a true human being with that compassion, that empathy, that love, that care for all other creations on earth, then you would live a happy and successful life. You would live that life that's stress-free, trouble-free. Your mind is not filled with guilt and problems. And then you're able to live a better and more satisfactory life on this earth before you move on to the next world. This is the core objective. We have a narration, for example, where a man comes to the Prophet and tells him, what's the minimum requirement for me to enter heaven? Give me the minimum. If you come to any regular Muslim nowadays and you ask them that question, they'll give you a whole list of 100 things to do and tell you that if you fulfill all of these, I could flip pages around and then this is how you're going to be saved. This is the reality. The Prophet told them, love for your neighbor what you love for yourself, and hate for your neighbor what you hate for yourself. This is the basic, minimum requirement to enter heaven. If you can live with this attitude, if you're able to fulfill this, then that's the kind of life in this world you're living in a heavenly state before you go into heaven in the afterworld. having that attitude to love for someone else what you love for yourself. It's not just a saying that we say. It's an attitude of life. It's a feeling that you experience. When you have someone who is not you, buys a house, for example, a beautiful house, or has a wonderful job, or buys a very nice car, or has a great family, instead of feeling jealous for what they have, you love that they got this, because if you had received it, you would have been very happy too. Having that attitude is not easy either, where you're able to let go or remove these vices from your heart. These vices that religion told us to remove because they cause harm inside of our souls. They ruin our minds. When you're a jealous person, you're an envious person, you're someone with anger, then you're going to be constantly suffering because you're never happy with what you have. You're always going after what other people have. You're never satisfied and content with what you have in life. You're always looking outside. What does that person have? What does that person have? Why is his life like that? Why is her life like that? Why am I not like this? Always looking outwardly, trying to imitate other people or get what other people have. You'll never be happy. You're never going to be satisfied. So religion comes and teaches us these things because in reality, what it wants to do is it wants us to live that life of peace. That's the summary of what religion is trying to do. If you come to all the laws that are revealed and all this other stuff, the objective of them is to make you live in that state. Unfortunately, we've understood it the other way around. We feel that the objective of prayer is to pray. Prayer is a means to something else. It's a tool. You know, we invent tools as human beings. A hammer was invented not for itself, right? We don't just buy a hammer for the sake of the hammer. You buy a hammer to build something with. It's a tool. But without the hammer, you can't build that thing. Similarly, there are laws that religion has revealed for us because God knows that the human nature needs these things. We're forgetful people. As human beings, we forget a lot, so we need reminders. For people who, if someone doesn't remind us to think beyond ourselves and be ethical and moral, we tend to forget this and become unethical and immoral and lose our morality. Right? This is how our nature is. We tend to become too attached to certain vices, to certain pleasures. And we need something to control us and to guide us. So religion comes with this role. It comes to make us human beings, to make us realize that this world is transient. It comes from an individual who's a prophet, who he himself has detached himself from this world. And the prophet, don't think that he was born this way. We all know that the prophet used to hike a mountain and he used to go into a cave. And this is before he was sent as a messenger. He used to meditate, he used to pray, he used to speak to God for 40 years before the message was sent to him. He himself had to go through this process as well. If the prophet had to go and meditate and pray and think and contemplate, why do we think that we can reach anything without doing any of that? That shows us that there's a need for us to be able to disconnect from the chaos of this world. And yesterday, when I began introducing this hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that he sent to his companions, it mentions in that narration that the companions had a separate room in their house for prayer. That was their room where they would detach from this world, sit down and contemplate and think. The senses were not occupied there. There was no sound, no smell other than a beautiful smell. If you have to do that, like for prayer, it's recommended to put a good scent on. So nothing that distracts you. It's necessary for us as human beings to disconnect in this way. And that's why you find a lot of people that are not even religious, they don't even believe in religion, that promote this idea of disconnecting now. But there's a difference between what religion is promoting and what these movements are promoting. What they're doing is good because they realize that human beings need this. We're all suffering, we're all depressed, we're never happy, we're never satisfied. I know a lot of friends who don't believe in any God, but they wake up in the morning and they have their morning meditation. When I was in Germany, my roommate, we used to go every morning to the woods. She would do her meditation. I would do my Fajr prayers over there. She didn't believe in a God. But this was her daily routine. She was someone who was very intelligent, very calm, very peaceful, very helpful, very empathetic towards other people. Loving for other people, always active in helping those who are in need. They've developed a lot of groups of food sharing and a lot of movements that they developed there in Germany that focus on helping other human beings, people that don't believe in God. But this meditation has that effect on them. So meditation and contemplation has an effect on the human soul. In our narrations, the Imams tell us that to contemplate for 1 hour is better than worshiping for a whole year. Because contemplation allows you to delve deeply into your soul. And then your worship becomes much better if you become a person of contemplation. If you pray and you speak to God, most of the time, there's only sound that's emitting from your mouth. It's not coming from your heart. How do you pray from your heart? You have to contemplate. You have to discover who you are. You have to sit down between you and yourself and figure out who you are. You have to calm down that chaos that's inside of you. So contemplation is given much more importance than prayer itself. Why? Because it intensifies prayer. It amplifies it. It makes prayer reach the objective that it was made for. But usually we focus on prayer only, and we don't focus on contemplation. We have it the other way around. If you don't pray, you go to hell. So you do it because you feel you have to do it. You lose the objective. You lose the point of prayer. Prayer is to hold in the Islamic tradition the ascension of the believer. It makes you ascend spiritually. But if it's not doing that, then it's like what the Prophet described, when he saw some people praying very quickly in the mosque, he said that, they're praying, they're doing what the chickens do, right? The chicken, they peck on the ground. That's how they eat. They move their heads up and down. And it becomes just a movement. It doesn't go beyond us. It doesn't reach the heavens. It doesn't go out. It doesn't have an effect on us. So the Prophet didn't come to put these laws on us to make our lives more difficult. He put them for us in order for us to calm down and realize our inner truth and our inner reality. This is why he came. This is why he put these teachings. And I spoke yesterday about the idea of 1,400 years of history that came and added layers upon layers of impurities that changed the idea of religion. And this happened to every religion. It didn't happen just to Islam. Empires came, governors came. They all had their own version of things. They wanted to amend things. In the Islamic world, you had certain caliphs or kings that had people that they employed to invent narrations. We have one person that narrates over 100,000 narrations from the Prophet, and he didn't live with the Prophet more than a year and a half. How to be like? If you calculate it, you must have heard something from the Prophet every day. And it's impossible. But he was employed by one of the governments at that time. So they usually present a version of religion that fits with whatever they want. And this continues until this day. Salaat ala Muhammad wa ala. So yesterday I promised to begin with this letter that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam sent to his companions. I'll take one segment from it. I'll speak briefly about that, and then I'll end my lecture, and tomorrow we'll continue with another segment. So the first thing that the Imam tells his companions in this letter that he sent to them, he tells them, فَاسْأَلُوا رَبَّكُمْ وَالْعَافِيَةِ. Ask from God or from your Lord well-being. Ask for well-being from God. From all the prayers that the Imam could have prayed, from everything he could have said, he chose to talk about well-being and not about anything else. He tells his followers, what you have to ask from your Lord is well-being. And the Imam told his companions to study his letter, to contemplate over it. And that's what we're trying to do right now. We're trying to see why the Imam might have chosen well-being as the prayer, as a request, over everything else he could have requested. So I went and I gathered a lot of narrations that talked about well-being. And I found some very interesting ones. Imam Rida alayhi salam was walking one day and he heard a man praying to God. The man was saying, "Oh God, grant me patience." So the Imam stopped and told him, "You've asked for trouble." He said, because if you ask for patience when you're not going through any problem, what are you really asking for? How do you get patience? You have to be patient over something, right? You have to be going through some problem in order for you to be patient. So if you're telling God, give me patience, what's he going to give you? He's going to give you trouble and problems, right? Because that's the only way you can develop your patience. Patience doesn't come by itself. It's something you develop by enduring things. So if you don't have problems in your life, the Imam is telling him, if you ask for patience when you're not going through a difficulty, then you're asking for trouble. You're asking for problems. He said, don't say that. It's better for you to pray as the Prophet had taught us to pray. Oh God, we ask you for well-being. Well-being in this world and well-being in the hereafter. This is the prayer that the Prophet taught us to have. To have this positive attitude in life. Because in our mind, if you're a religious person, then you have to be someone who's suffering all the time. You always have bad luck. You always have problems. You always go through issues. And unfortunately, a lot of the problems that we go through in life, our own shortcomings, we tend to blame on being religious. You yourself don't care to perfect yourself. You have vices inside of yourself that cause problems in your life. You're someone who's tardy, for example. You're late to work in the morning, you missed your classes in school, and you get into a lot of problems. So what do you say as a mu'min, as a believer? Allah's testing me. Allah, give me patience to handle this. Alhamdulillah, I'm a believer, and that's why my boss is yelling at me. Right? It's not because I set my alarm 10 minutes earlier and got up and went to work. No, he's yelling at me because God is testing me as a believer. I get into some sort of business, I don't do my homework about that business, I lose my money. Alhamdulillah, man. You know, I went to this business and I invested all my money and I lost. Allah is testing my patience. When he never did any research about the market, for example. We have this attitude, we tend to blame religion because we think that suffering always comes hand in hand with religion. It's true that the nature of this world does bring about suffering. That's the nature of the physical world. In order for us to walk from one place to another, we have to use our legs, right? We consume energy, therefore we need to eat. We need to take care of our health. The nature of the physical world involves some sort of suffering. That's what the physical world is. They call it in Islamic philosophy the clash of the wills. Every creature, every existence has the will to exist. And in the physical world, we clash with each other. The metaphysical world, this clash doesn't exist. But we're not going to go into that and explain that. But the nature of this physical world has suffering inside of it. Not everybody can be a millionaire. This is the nature of this world. Not everybody can have everything. Not everybody is going to be born perfect. We're going to have illnesses. We're going to have, we inherit illnesses through our genes. This is how the physical world exists. So when it comes to these things that are out of our hands, in order to cope with them, we tend to submit ourselves to God because that helps us endure these problems. It helps us go through these issues in a much more healthy way than someone who's never happy with the problem that they have. So having that idea gives you a more positive attitude in life. So the Imam here is putting in our minds that if you are religious and you believe in God, you should always ask for well-being. If you can live a life without suffering, then that's the life that you should have. You shouldn't be someone who's always looking for trouble in their life, always looking to suffer in their life. No. One time, the Prophet, another hadith, was praying in congregation, and the man, he overheard a person praying to God, saying, "Oh God, punish me with my sins in this world before you punish me in the hereafter." When the Prophet completed his prayer, he went to him and told him, "What a terrible prayer you're doing. Why do you want God to punish you in this world with your sins? Why don't you just ask God to forgive you here and forgive you there? Wouldn't that be a better prayer? Instead of, but this is the mentality. You think that, so this is related to our own perception of God as well. And in our narrations, the prophet says that God says, I am as my servant or creature thinks of me. If good, then good, and if bad, then bad. If I think that God is an evil being, then I start interpreting things in that way. If I wake up in the morning and I say, man, it's going to be a bad day today, what's going to happen? It's going to be a bad day. Not because the day is bad, even though when something bad does happen, I knew it was going to be a bad day. Right? We affirm it, we confirm it, but it's not bad. It's I have that mentality when I wake up. When I have that mentality, then anything that happens around me, I'm going to interpret it that way. And God says that I'm also in this equation. If you think that I'm bad, then whatever happens to you, you're going to blame it on me as God, and I'm going to be that bad God. If you think that God is chasing you with a stick, trying to beat you for everything that you do, then you're going to become someone who has OCD or some other issue when it comes to religion. So it's very important to have that positive attitude, realistic as well. We don't want to be like all toxic, positive, disconnected from reality. There are issues that we have to deal with. There are suffering, there are problems. We can't say everything is positive. No, that's also an extremity. We're looking for a balance here. The problem that I'm talking about is that we're extremely towards the negative side. So, and we can see this reflected during the Prophet's time and the Imam's time with these individuals who were saying these prayers and having this mindset, and the Prophet and the Imams were trying to amend that and to correct it. Another interesting hadith that I read, we all know the story of Prophet Joseph, peace be upon him, right? When he was told by the woman at that time to commit a certain sin with them, or they would put him in prison. And Joseph prayed to God and said, oh God, prison is more beloved to me than what they're calling upon me to do, or they're calling on me to do. So he refuses to do what they told him to do and put in prison, right? He was in prison. Now Joseph, peace be upon him, is in jail. He sits down and he thinks to himself, why did I get into jail? So he's a prophet. He speaks to God. And he tells him, oh God, what did I do that made me deserving of being put in prison? What is it that I did in my life that made me suffer like this? And we ask this question all the time. What is it that I did that made me become like this? Or made me suffer like this? So when Joseph asked God this question, this hadith is from Imam alayhi salam. The hadith, the Imam said that God responded to him. He said, you asked for it. You said, oh God, prison is more beloved to me than what you're telling me to do. You said that. You said prison is more beloved. If you asked for, God says in the hadith, if you told me that well-being is more beloved to me, I would have given you well-being and not put you in prison. You asked for it. Because again, this is the mentality that at that time, Joseph was comparing between this act and the punishment that he would, and he preferred the punishment to be in jail over committing that sin. But if he had thought that God could get him out of it in a different way, he doesn't have to go to jail to get out of this problem. God has many different ways that he can save it from. So again, it's this mentality, this attitude that we have to amend, that we have to fix, that we have to forward in life, asking for well-being in this sense instead of always looking towards suffering and difficulties and hardships. The last hadith that I'm going to read and conclude with, and hopefully use it as a hadith to continue tomorrow, Imam Ali, peace be upon him, says that well-being is made up of 10 parts. 9 parts of it are to be found in silence. And tomorrow, maybe we can talk about the importance of silence and how silence could affect us and how we could improve our life, inshallah. I was asked by many individuals to pray for their ill ones and to keep them and remember them in my prayers and the prayers of the believers here. So I ask everyone to pray for those individuals that ask me for their prayers, and for all the ill ones in this world, everyone who's suffering, everyone's having difficulty in this life. We're all the creations of God, all of us. God didn't just create us, He created everyone and everything in this world. So I ask everyone to recite Surah Al-Fatiha and to perform a prayer in their heart, at least for a few seconds, for whoever asked me for this dua. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala
Thank you very much, Sheriff. So,
Ya Hussein, 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 Hussein. قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، کربلا میں قیامت کا ایک شور ہے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، کوئی روتی ہے اپنے جواں لال کو، رو رہی ہے کوئی کم سخن کے لیے، اپنی بربادیوں کو گوارا کیا، خون میں ڈوبے گلوں کا نظارہ کیا، دے دیا فاطمہ کا برا گلستان، کربلا تیرے اجڑے چمن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، قصر ظالم کبھی قید خانہ، کبھی نوک نیزہ، کبھی تازیہ نہ، کبھی کون سی تھی اذیت جو دی نہ گئی، ہر جفا تھی اسیر محل کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، جب چلے تھے مدینے سے سب ساتھ تھے، اون جعفر تھے، اکبر تھے، عباس تھے، جا رہی ہوں مدینے تو کوئی نہیں، اب مصیبت فقط ہے بہن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا ہے وطن کے لیے، قافلہ جا رہا है वतन के लिए। कब्र कासिम से है यूं मुखातिब फुफी, तेरी शादी कुछ इस तरह पल में हुई, कोई से रे कभी फूल बाकी नहीं, वरना ले जाती कब्रे हसन के लिए। काफिला जा रहा है वतन के लिए, काफिला जा रहा है वतन के लिए। कोई चादर न थी, कैसी बेदाद थी, हाथ होते हुए भी नाज़ाद थी, कितनी मजबूर कर दी गई थी बहन अपने भाई के कफनो दफन के लिए। काफिला जा रहा है वतन के लिए, काफिला जा रहा है वतन के लिए। कोई रोती है अपने जवान लाल को, रो रही है कोई कम सुखन के लिए। या हुसैन, 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 या हुसैन।
يكون أربعين يوم كربلاء آفرین دلاخت گریه کن چون أربعین است زیاد کربلاء آفرین است دلاخت گریه کن چون أربعین است زیاد کربلاء آفرین است دلاخت گریه کن چون أربعین است سوز دل که أربعین از آن به خط چون مرسلی نراشی در ریشه دارد نگه کنی ز خط خون چنین یاد کربلا آفرین است خون گریه کن چون أربعین است یاد کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است یاد کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است حسین ابن علی سالار دین حسین ابن علی سالار دین امام رهبر اهل یقین امام رهبر اهل یقین یا کربلا یا سراسر برس مسلمین یا کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است یا کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است حسین استان که با هم نشین دار حجت و جبرائیل حسین استان که در خط شهادت امام اولین آخرین یاد کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است یاد کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است حسین استان که را جاودان حسین استان که باطن را عیان کرد حسین استان که خود دین بیان کرد حسین استان که با آفرین یاد کربلا آفرین است دلا خون گریه کن چون أربعین است یاد
ها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
ز آشورای او زنده گردیم بنای کربلا سازنده گردیم دل دنیا ندارد شک و تردید که آشورا نبرد کفر و دین به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است دلا کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
دلا روی حسین عشق زنیم با کعبه دلها همین اگر خون شهید حلقه باشیم حسین ابن علی صالحین به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
افق از خون پاکان ران گونه حال دین حق و تاج خونه افق از خون پاکان ران گونه حال دین حق و تاج خونه برای یاری بهترین شهادت در ره قرآن و دین به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
شهید عاشقان کربلایی شهید ساکن کوی بلایی شهید معنی قلوب بلایی شهید را مکان خوب بریم به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است دلا کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
شهادت زندگی در نامکان شهادت لطف هر پهلوانی شهادت چون حیات جاودانی است میان مردها زیباترین به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است به یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
دل ما در پی کاروان است که از کرب و بلا غم روان چه زنجیری به دست بازوان که گریم دیده روح الامین است
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
دل ما در پی کاروان که از کرب و بلا با غم روان چه زنجیری به دست بازوان که گریم دیده روح الامین است
به یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
اگر در کربلا غم بی‌قرار است اگر دلها شیعه داغدار است اگر چشمان مهدی انوار است داغ آن داغ آفرین است
یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
اگر در کربلا غم بی‌شمار اگر دلهای شیعه داغدار اگر چشمان مهدی اشرفان ز داغ آن به داغ آفرین است دلا
یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
پیام خون خطاب آتشین است بقای دین رهین اربعین که تاریخ پر از خون و شهادت سراسر اربعین است به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا خون گریه کن چون اربعین است
به دوران سیاه سلطه شب که می‌ریزند از جاگران جهاد حضرت سجاد و زینب بیان خطبه های آتشین است به
یاد
یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است
زبان زینب این بانوی کرد که هست آموزگار هر زن و چنان در کوفه توفانی به پاک تو بود خود امیر مؤمنین است به
یاد
یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است
اسیر را چو بر دل نشان کن تو گوی تیر غم در دل نشان کن گلی را چیده و گل نشان کن رقی آن گل شدا بدین به یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است
دیار شام با آگرین دیار شام با آگرین قلوب شیعیان کم هزین هزار زینب و به رقیه تجلیگاه عشق عارفین است به
یاد
یاد
کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است
شهادت نامه ها خوبان نوشتم چو خوش خون خود خوبان نوشتم شهادت نامه ها خوبان نوشتم چو خوش خون خود خوبان نوشتم به دل بستند و باز دار پیمان به خون سر خط آن خوبان نوشتم بیابان لاله گون کردند و رفتم کتاب عشق را اینان نوشتم بود خون شهید پاک از آن رو که با آن معنی آن نوشتم
یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است
شهیدان امتحان و پیش دادم که در عشق تا پایان نوشتم گهی در مسجد و گاهی به محراب گهی در صحنه میدان نوشتم
یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است
برای درد مظلومان عالم طبیبان نسخه درمان نوشتم به دستور خدا نام شهیدان دستور خدا نام شهیدان به باب روضه رضوان نوشتند ز جان هر شهید یادوار به برگ لاله ایمان نوشتند
یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است یاد کربلا دلها غمین است دلا گریه کن تو حرمین است یا حسین 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 Ya Hussein,
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 Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
वक्त जब ये ज़ैनब दरबार में गई थी कारी नमाजियों से महफिल सजी हुई थी जालिम ये पूछता था गाजी तेरा कहाँ है बालों से मुँह छुपाए ज़ैनब ये कह रही थी ए मेरे बाप बचा और है अल्लाह बाप बचा
ہو رہی ہے مسا سر چھپاؤں کہاں
قیامت ہے بے وطن بے امان آ گیا
میرے باپ جان ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں میرے باپ جان ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں
میں بھی ہوں مرضیہ بنت خیر النساء میں بابت ہے بھی اللہ نام سے نام میرا نے کو رکھ دیا دے دیا اپنی زبان میں نے
ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں
بابا مانگتی رہ گئی کام کر سر گئے مر گئی ہر گئے شام ہے نام سن نہ میرا مر گیا نہ
ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں
جو سکی ہر نشان سے رہی آ رہی ہے سدا بابا جان
ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں میرے ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں
شام پھولا میرے ماں میری چادر سے ہے میری ماں کا سکون
ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں
بابا جان یہ آخری کا بیان تیری چاہ جوان مر گیا زندگی ہے رضا کہتی ہے بیتا میرے
بچان ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں
بابا جان
ہو رہی ہے آسان سر چھپاؤں کہاں हो रही है अज़ान सर झुका कहाँ हो रही है अज़ान सर झुका कहाँ हो रही है सर झुका कहाँ हो रही है सर झुका कहाँ हो रही है Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين سيد المصلحين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك وعلى 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا مولانا يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمامي وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وذكرك رحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توها وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
अरबईं के सोगवारो अलविदा अलविदा, शाहिदी के दोस्तदारो अलविदा अलविदा।
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدین کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
خاتمہ بالخیر چہلم کا ہوا
خاتمہ بالخیر چہلم کا ہوا
خاتمہ بالخیر چہلم کا ہوا الوداع اے عشق بارو الوداع اے الوداع
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدین کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
کہہ رہے ہیں مرقدوں پر رحل بیت
مرقدوں پر اہل بیت
کہہ رہے ہیں مرقدوں پر اہل بیت فاطمہ زہرا کے پیارو الوداع اے الوداع
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدین کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
دشت سونا پاس بستی بھی نہیں
دشت سونا پاس بستی بھی نہیں
دشت سونا پاس بستی بھی نہیں بے دیارو بے مزارو الوداع اے الوداع
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدین کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
کربلا کی خاک کو سونپا تمہیں
کربلا کی خاک کو سونپا تمہیں
کربلا کی خاک کو سونپا تمہیں عرش اعظم کے ستارو الوداع اے الوداع
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع شاہدین کے دوست دارو الوداع الوداع
اکبر و اصغر علی کی ضامنی
اکبر و اصغر علی کی ضامنی
اکبر و اصغر علی کی ضامنی نوجوانوں شیر خوارو الوداع اے الوداع
اربعین کے سوگوارو الوداع الوداع
सिधारो अलविदा ए अलविदा